And welcome back to the In the Game interview series. We've got Jay Burbee with us today. Jay, thanks for joining us. Why don't you give us some background on your playing experience, what got you into the game, and what's your coaching roles now, and what's your previous experience with coaching as well?
Yeah, sure. No problem. First off, I have my master's degree in sports and recreational sciences with its concentration in coaching education. I have a USSF National B coaching license. As far as playing, I started playing when I was 5 years old back in the 70s. Played all the way up through college for 2 years. Played a couple of years of semi-pro, Wilmington, North Carolina for one season, then back in Pennsylvania where I'm from. As far as coaching, I started coaching when I was 18. I did it as a summer job from college when I was in as my freshman year, and picked it up after I pretty much stopped playing. Went all the way through coaching all the volunteer levels up through all the club levels in high school. Was on the PA West ODP staff for 4 years and was actually being named to the Region 1 ODP staff when my wife got a job transferred down to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I am now, and went through coaching club and 4 years of college, and now I'm a director of coaching at a small club and coaching the UPSL men's team.
Very nice, very nice. This is something that I've asked everybody that's come on so far. Why do you coach?
Probably the biggest reason behind why I coach, coming up as a player, you get your handful of really good coaches, but everybody runs across one that's just a bad coach. You don't like to bash coaches, but everybody runs into a bad coach. And then the chance to give back to a game that gave so much to me growing up as a kid and through college and everything. And, and the main thing that I look at is what I call the myth of the great coach. And I see it a lot happening prevalent these days. You talk to some of the parents that you meet. I meet certain parents a lot of times and they say, well, my kid plays soccer, my kid's been playing for so long. And, I just simply go through questions to get a background. Where are they playing at? How long have they been playing? And then I eventually get to, well, how's the coaching there? And I hear a lot of them say, the coach is fantastic. And I go into my next question, just sort of fishing. And I say, well, what makes him really that great of a coach? And unfortunately, probably 80% of the time, a lot of the answers I get is, well, he's a really good coach because he played at so-and-so. And it's what I call the myth of the great coach. A lot of people believe that a coach is really great because they played at a certain level. And to me, that just never made any sense. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is true. There are some great coaches out there who played at high levels. But there are some coaches out there who have played at the highest levels that I wouldn't let go anywhere near my kids to train them. But it's still a myth, and a lot of people believe that the best coaches out there are the guys who played professionally at some huge level or played for some incredible D1 school, and that's really not the truth.
Very nice. What style of play do you typically like to play with your teams?
Depending on the athletes I have, it switches a lot, but I'm a big believer in a lot of possession. I like to see my teams use as much of the field as they can, spreading it out as wide as they can. And I am big into a relentless attack. When people ask me all the time, like, what team do you mold your teams after, anything, I really look at the U.S. women's national team as one of the teams that I really mold that style of play, just that relentless attack. And when they get the possession of the ball, they keep it for so long that they literally wear teams down, making them chase them, making them try to win the ball back. And, as soon as they win a ball, the U.S. women's national team isn't looking to play all the way back to the back and try to build things up. They win a ball, they're going to the goal. I mean, they're relentless with their attack, and they're just nonstop. They don't care what the score is. And they just keep going. And I try to gear most of my teams in that type of style.
Yeah, I think that's kind of similar to what I try to do with my teams. As soon as we win the ball, our first option is always forward, and then if that's not available, then we go sideways and backwards to kind of build some possession, get some numbers around the ball, and try to pull some players into space to open some things up for us. So
Yeah, I definitely tell my players, you win the ball, look big first. Your first look should always be big. Can we go directly to the net? One look quickly, can we go directly to the net? If not, then let's keep the ball. But I mean, as soon as somebody else gets the next pass, look real quick. Can we go to the net?
yeah.
Every single time we play the ball with somebody else, I tell my players, look big first. Look and see if you can go to the goal. And that should be your first option.
Yeah. So now you're both the DOC of the club for the youth, and you're also coaching the UPSL men's team. How different is it working with the UPSL players and working with the youth players?
Um, the biggest difference that I can really see with the youth players, you're still trying to mold that mentality along with not only trying to get them tactically and technically sound and everything else, but that mentality of this is really what I want to do and this is where I want my focus to be. And with the UPSL guys, these guys are there. These are guys who are already playing in college or have gone through the college ranks. And they're looking for that opening to get themselves to the next level. Can I get a pro contract, even if it's USL or something like that? These guys are looking to try to make a name for themselves to get to the next level. So you're dealing with a whole different mindset of player of not just, teaching them the technical and tactical and everything else like that to just be a great player. These guys are looking to be showcased, looking to show their abilities and stuff to get to the next level. And UPSL is a really, really it's a big opportunity for some of these guys, but it's also difficult. There is no unlimited substitutions. I get 7 substitutions during the match. And once you're substituted out, your day's over, your game's over. So your starting 11 is really going to pull a lot of the time. And it really really shadows a professional type of game. Instead of like a 3 substitution rule, we do have a 7, but
Yeah.
it's a fact that once you're out, you're out.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, with training schedules and stuff like that, with you're kind of dealing with some of the younger players that maybe are still in college, so they're kind of coming back and forth with their college teams, or those guys that are very young that have just finished. I'm sure trying to find a training schedule can be very difficult with that as well.
Yeah, and guys have jobs and guys have families and stuff like that. It's not just 18-year-old, 19-year-old. Some of these guys are mid-20s. I actually have one player who works at Chick-fil-A but lives in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and he has never missed a practice. He has never missed a game. He's never missed anything. He drives 3 hours after working all day, drives all the way to Raleigh, trains for 2 hours, then gets back in his car, drives home 3 hours back to Myrtle Beach, and gets up in the morning and goes to work.
Well, that shows dedication to the rest of the team, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the rest of the team looks at him and they're like, Christian, you're insane. Can't you find somebody else to play with or anything else? And he goes, there's no UPSL close enough to me. I want to be here.
Well, it's when you find a place that you fit in, sometimes you'll make the sacrifices to be there.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's one of your favorite activities to do with your teams?
Probably the best thing I like doing is I'm a big believer in small sided. So I don't do much stuff bigger than 4v4. And that's my favorite thing is just getting them into 4v4. If there's certain things I want them to work on, I can always put restrictions on or stuff like that, or, change the game in a certain way. But 4v4 gives you everything you need for the basic attack and defending of anything that happens on the field. All happens 4v4. But I think the most fun I do is I'll put them in their 4v4s and I won't put any restrictions on. I'll let them just free play.
Mm-hmm.
And it really allows a player to build up that creativity level and everything. And I think the more restrictions we put on players, the more we, try to really house players into this mold as coaches, we're really hampering that creativity. A player wants to try stuff. A player wants to do things that they see out on the pro field and they see other players doing, and they want to emulate them. And, we can't really hamstring them. I think it's a big development, especially in youth players, is allowing them to experiment, allow them to fail, and I think just open 4v4, splitting, small sided games up, put 2 goals down for each 4v4 thing, and just let guys play. Just let the players be players. I love doing that with my teams.
Yeah, that was something my college team did a lot. We did a lot of small 3v3, 4v4, 6v6, and I think we use it as a way to try to build a competitive environment, because if you lost, you went down the ladder and you ran. So we would be basically having fistfights in training over not losing to our teammates. So once we got into games, things were a little bit easier. We had to temper things a little bit because they were actually calling fouls in that, but we weren't in practice. So what's one of your favorite coaching memories?
As far as coaching memories, everybody's got like really big wins they've had, really, really exciting moments. The biggest win I ever had was my first year of coaching college, coaching Division I junior college, and we played the number 6 ranked team in the country. We were unranked, anything else like that, and I went to their place and beat them 1-0. That's probably the biggest one I ever had. But my favorite moment ever coaching was at Region 1 ID camp up in University of Rhode Island, and onto the field came Tony DeChico. He was on the Region 1 staff there, and it was crazy. I'm running a session with these girls, and I walked off to the side, and he pulled me off to the side, looked at me right dead in the face, and he said, "Yeah, you are an amazing coach. You've got a great voice. I love watching how you work with these kids, and you're going to be really good one day." And to have a guy who's won a World Cup and an Olympic gold medal and is in the Hall of Fame for coaching to tell you that you're a great coach and everything and you're going to do great things, that was the highlight so far of my career.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was a great guy. I actually ran into him my first. I went and did my national diploma with what was then the NSCAA. We were down in Florida at the Soccer Hotel, and me and my roommate were going down to go to breakfast, and he hopped on the elevator with us and talked with us for 5-10 minutes like he'd known us forever. So can't say enough great things about him, for sure.
Yeah, he was a great guy. That was early in my ODP career, and I actually worked with him for 2 years after that. He brought me onto his staff at Soccer Plus. So I actually worked with Tony. I worked with his sons. I worked with Janusz Mihalik. It was a great experience being with those guys. And Tony was he was everyday Tony. That guy was not any different any day. He was genuine. He was really just genuine and just a great guy. And definitely will be missed.
For sure. What do you feel like is the most important piece of being a coach?
Probably the biggest thing is athlete retention, and really working on trying to keep athletes, making sure that they're happy, making sure that they feel invested in the team that they're with. You really got to have them have that feeling of some type of ownership. When they're out there working and everything, it can't all be about, I'm doing this for the coach or something. There has to be that feeling of, I own part of this. I own a lot of this that's happening, And one of the things that we worked on through my master's degree was, how to do and how to keep athletes. There was a study that was done where they took 100 athletes who had sorry, that's my daughter walking through. There were 100 athletes that they pulled that were either had quit the sport that they were in to do another sport or completely quit athletics altogether. And 90% of them, when they were asked why they quit, it was because of an experience with a coach. So it really, brought things into light that how much, watching what you're doing as a coach, and if you're not really paying attention to making sure these athletes feel invested, you may lose the next best player, you never know. Guys are looking at U12 players saying, oh, that's the best player and that's the worst player. And I've seen U12 players that clubs wouldn't even look at turn around and become Division I, full rides and end up playing at the highest levels. Everybody develops differently. So if you don't really look at keeping that athlete invested and retaining them in the sport, we could lose a lot of the best players here in this country. And I think that's probably what has hampered the men's side, is trying to keep these athletes retained on the men's side in the sport, not losing them to the baseballs and the footballs and all that stuff like that.
And I think a big part of that is just being genuine in your relationship and being honest. I think there's in the club environment today, it seems like there's very much you're going to tell the parents what they want to hear, which eventually they're going to find out. Whether it's they find out through being around you or they find out by being around somebody else. So I think it just goes to show that being genuine and being honest, I think, goes a long way, not just in the soccer world, but just in the world in general,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, integrity and honesty are two of the things that I try to keep as my main focus when I'm dealing with teams and dealing with parents and everything. You can't try to blow smoke. You got to be genuine. You got to be honest, and it goes a long way. People don't want to be lied to. They don't want to be told something that isn't true.
Mm-hmm. So working with Lazers there, obviously you guys are a smaller club here in the Raleigh area, and I'm with Neuse River right now, who's obviously another smaller club in the Raleigh area. What are some of the battles that you guys have as a club right
now? Probably the biggest battle is wow. Having the fields and everything is really tough. We're a small club. We have one field, one location that we train on. Instead of having multiple locations, it's grass. If the weather's bad, it gets shut down. We don't have turf. We don't have lights. So there's only certain times you can train. And, the bigger clubs who have different locations and turf locations and lit locations, they can train constantly. That's one of the tough things that we deal with Lazers. But we are small, we're grassroots, and we're family oriented. So I almost don't want to be that big club that we see. And it doesn't go along with what I came from in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, when you're at the cup level with your state cup teams, your clubs there can only have one team per age group. You can't have 7 U12 boys teams. You get one. Yeah. So when 85 kids come to your U12 boys tryout, you take 18 and that's it. You can't take all 80 of them and make, however many teams you want to make. And also when you're a club up there that runs state cup teams, you cannot run what we call challenge. You guys call, you call it challenge here too. The challenge level. We were not allowed to run challenge level teams if we were a state cup team. They considered that recruiting up in Pennsylvania. So all of the challenge levels were all community run. That was all left up to the communities to run, community coaches, local communities. And then we would go and, try to find players from there instead of running it all ourselves and just keeping the players in-house. I think it made things a little more competitive up in Pennsylvania instead of, one monopoly of clubs running everything that everybody runs to and everybody else is just trying to scrape to survive.
Yeah. I think, I think with Neuse River, we're fighting some of those same battles with fields and using some temporary lights at some of our locations and only having grass. I'll be with North Carolina FC next year, so I'll be on the other side of that battle a little bit next year. So, so it'll be an interesting change. I'm kind of looking forward to it. So, but yeah, I think any advice that you have for young coaches or coaches at any level that you think would be helpful?
Probably the biggest thing I would say to a young coach starting out is don't think anything is ever too small for you to do. If you're first getting in, I mean, even volunteering somewhere, you may not get paid. You know, it may not be this big glory thing, but you know, you could really learn a lot. And trust me, don't think that the only guys you can learn from are the guys who are at, you know, the main clubs and the big college levels and stuff like that. There are a lot of very good small community coaches out there who have a lot of knowledge, a lot of years of experience, and have dealt with a lot of stuff that, you know, you can learn from anybody. You know, it's not a one size fits all sport. You know, if it was that easy, somebody would just write a book, we'd all read it, we'd all be experts. But I mean, you know, learn from whoever you can, pick up advice from wherever you can, work camps, anything you can. Try to get in with different coaches and ask them questions. You know, there isn't a coach out there that's going to look at a new coach and say, well, I'm not going to tell him, you know, this or that. You know, you know, we all want to see really good coaches come through. It just does nothing but benefit the entire sport. So, I mean, none of us are out here keeping secrets, you know, our own little trade secrets we're not going to tell anybody. You know, go ask some of the coaches that have been around for a while. That's what I did when I started out at 18 years old. And, you know, I did the volunteer stuff. I worked low level. I was an assistant for years. You know, I was the guy picking up cones and setting cones down and, hey, go get me 12 orange pennies and all that stuff like that. I was that guy. I went through that. But I learned a lot going through that, and I watched what the other coaches did and took little mental notes and, you know, what could I do to improve it? What would I change on it? And when I went through and finally got most of my coaching jobs, I felt really experienced and comfortable when I stepped out there, and I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. So that would be my advice: is do whatever you can, learn from who you can.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to kind of do with this interview series, is try to give some exposure to some other coaches. You know, obviously, like you're talking about, go and learn and ask. I mean, I went out to watch NC State train 2 or 3 times this spring. I typically go out and watch Duke train a couple of times a year. I don't have really any connections at UNC, so I don't go see them too much. But you know, I think like, even as somebody, I've been a college head coach now for 5 years. I'm continuing to try to learn and get better. I think that there's a lot of things that you can go and learn from just going and watching a training session. You know, you might pick up something that you like and you want to tweak your own way. Or you might just look at something and be like, well, I never even thought about doing it that way, and I'm gonna do it that way from now on. If this
Yeah,
is
definitely.
so, you know, I think that those are very, very good points for sure. So I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us today, Jay, and hopefully we're back on the field here pretty soon, and we're not keeping the cabin fever going too long.
Yeah, definitely. And everybody out there, man, stay home, stay safe, you know, all that stuff like that. You know, don't treat this like it's some kind of joke or something like that, you know. Follow what they're saying, everybody do what they're supposed to do, and we'll get through this.
Sure. Thanks again, Jay.
Yep.
Thanks again to Jay Burbee for coming on with us today. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode when we'll have Tim Gooder from New Bern High School. He coaches both the men and women's teams there, and he's also on North Carolina Youth Soccer's ODP staff, and then he also is in coaching education with North Carolina Youth Soccer as well. It's a good one. Check it out.